Hey everybody, it's Chris. Welcome. I just wanted to talk about my recent experience. I actually rewatched Malcolm in the Middle, which kind of wild because that revival just came out, and I just thought, well, what the hell? Let's go back and rewatch the original 2000 to 2006 series that I watched as a kid or as a teen. I was 15 when that show came out, and by the time it ended, I was well into college. And that's just like a lot of growth and change to go through over the span of a TV show. So, rewatching it, it was great. I mean, all I can say, I think whenever you watch an old thing or you reread an old thing from your youth, as I am rapidly aging before our eyes. Whenever you rewatch an old thing and it's good, and it's like actually good, like it's not just your nostalgia. I think you get a feeling of like, oh my god, I remember this and this is so good. This is bringing back those feelings again. And B, like, oh my god, I'm seeing this through a totally different lens now as well. So I have this layered experience of like nostalgia, but also newfound appreciation. So I just wanted to talk about what I saw in rewatching this show and what made it such a rich and interesting experience for me. Um, First of all, like the nostalgia hit, you know, for sure. Um, but what's interesting is that it aged really well, and that's really weird because you think, okay, this looks like the early 2000s, and maybe the nostalgia kind of feeds into that a little bit. But as you keep watching, you sort of just realize like it feels like the early 2000s, sure, but it also just kind of feels like the world of Malcolm in the Middle, and that's I think when they've done something right because they really created a look and feel that's so distinct and so interesting and so connected to their point of view. The show is messy and it's chaotic and it's a little bit gross and it's a little bit dirty. There's almost kind of like a Nickelodeon-esque like feeling to how it's produced. The editing is really interesting. They really nailed it. And I think the fact that, of course, like the acting and everything, and the writing is all really good and the jokes still land and all that stuff. But I think like in creating this really distinct experience and this really distinct feeling, they created something that really uh, is timeless. And that's the same thing that I would say for any show like that. Like the reason Seinfeld is still relevant, the reason old Simpsons episodes are still relevant. And I almost kind of feel like Malcolm in the Middle kind of got swept under the rug a little bit in that regard. Like obviously it still has its fans and it's still like a pretty well regarded show, but it didn't really have a second life in memes quite the way that like some of those other shows did. And I'm not quite sure why that is. Um, and I'm not quite sure why like it doesn't seem to have the same kind of luster or notoriety that some of those other shows have. Um, I think part of it, this might be a controversial statement, but I think part of it is that it's kind of working class coded. And I think shows like Seinfeld are more affluence coded. And, that kind of creates a different feeling, even The Simpsons too. So, but, that's just my theory. But nevertheless, the show really held up. and it's still really funny and still really good. And I think it's layered and nuanced in ways that I kind of forgot about. First thing that I really noticed is that Malcolm is not the voice of reason that I thought he was. He's a smart kid. Obviously, he's like a genius. He's really perceptive. He's very observant. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's infallible. And I think that's really interesting because now you've got this brilliant kid who's still a kid, and there's almost this like Larry David-esque quality of like he just can't let something go, and he just is so getting in his own way that like you can't help but like cringe a little bit watching as this train wreck is about to unfold. Um, and you know it's going to happen. And sometimes even Malcolm says to the camera, I know this is a bad idea. and, but that doesn't stop him. So that's a really interesting push and pull and a really interesting like inner conflict and inner sort of contradiction for this character that made him really interesting because think about it, if he was a genius and also like really good at life and made logically sound decisions, um, that would be a pretty boring show. So instead, he's this kind of weirdly layered kid who's also brilliant and also kind of a mess at the same time. So another thing too is that Hal and Lois are actually pretty good parents at the end of the day. Like they're rough and you know, they definitely exaggerate to a certain extent, to quite a lot, but like Hal and Lois have a pretty healthy relationship. Um, Lois owns up to her mistakes, and I don't know. I mean, I think for a show that really distorts and exaggerates the problems of the world, and I'll get to that in a minute, like, Hal and Lois are not the worst. I mean, Homer is a terrible dad, objectively terrible. There are other TV parents, usually dads, who are objectively terrible, but Hal and Lois are actually not so bad if you really look at it. So that I thought was interesting, and maybe that's the 41-year-old version of me watching this. I don't have kids, but you know, I gotta say, I have a little bit more compassion for those characters than I think I did 20 years ago. So that's another thing. Something else I really liked, the entire worldview of this show, there's just this there's this mentality and this kind of philosophy that like everything is kind of on the verge of collapse, and that's super interesting and super funny. um, Things that are solid and sound are not very funny. Like there's really nothing funny about being structurally sound, you know. But because everything in the life of the family and everything in the bigger systems of this world is kind of precarious and could collapse any minute, that's funny and that's interesting. And it's something that Hal and Lois reinforce often throughout the show from the beginning to the end. Something that you hear them say often is, oh, the whole system will break down. We can't do X, Y, and Z. The whole system is going to break down. Um, you know, like there's one episode where we find out that Hal loves Lois more than Lois loves Hal back. And you would think that this would be a devastating revelation for Hal, that he loves his wife more than she loves him. And he just says, "Oh, I know that, Lois." Like, of course. Otherwise, the whole system would break down. It's just funny. I don't know. That's just such a bizarre like worldview, and they hold true to that all the way to the end, all the way to like the last season. They're still saying, "Oh, the system could break down any minute. Oh, you can't do this. It's gonna break." You know, there's another episode where Reese, I can't remember why, but you know, Reese is a bully at school. When he suddenly, for some reason, is no longer a bully, and I can't remember why exactly. Um, the entire schoolyard descends into chaos and barbarism, and everyone is beating each other up, and everybody's like acting like animals. And Reese has to be there to keep the order. There's this like hierarchical, like animalistic view of humanity that uh, the show seems to have, that they kind of exaggerate and play with to a degree that is just really, really funny. It's just this very cynical view of humanity that we're basically animals, um, with these very thin and flimsy structures in place that are keeping us from being animals. And the system is definitely not perfect, but if one thing is out of place, it's like a house of cards. So I just love that. I think I'm like obsessed with this idea now. So that's something I really loved, and I really didn't really pick up on when I watched it the first time, because when you're watching things on network TV, you don't really have the viewpoint. You're not really able to kind of see these themes emerge as easily versus when you watch it all on streaming in one binge. You kind of go, oh, they keep saying this one thing. They keep like reinforcing this idea over and over again. And there's just something really deeply funny about it to me. So there's some other things I found really interesting as well. The show was really progressive for how cynical, deeply cynical the show seems to be. It still manages to push a pretty progressive um, message and messages. It's definitely anti-racist. Um, you know, sometimes it handles it better than others. Sometimes it's a little bit funky or ham-fisted or not quite right. But like, considering that it's a 25-year-old show, uh, and that some of these issues are still being talked about today, like people are still getting mad. You know that there are people online who are mad about like I came across a YouTube channel where people are mad that there are like black and brown people in some adaptation of a Tolkien, of like a Lord of the Rings thing. The fact that people are getting unglued because there's like black and brown elves, like they're mad about elves. Like you're able to suspend your disbelief for like talking trees and all this crap, and like, but like a Mexican elf is like beyond the pale apparently. So people are still morons. Let's be real. Morons are still getting mad about this sort of thing. But like, I would just say, hey, maybe check out this show called Malcolm in the Middle that was on TV 20 years ago, that aired on Fox, and you will see an unexpectedly diverse cast. Even though it focuses on this white family, you're gonna see friends and family members and you know, all these people in the cast who are black, who are in Stevie's case also has disabilities. Um, you're gonna see, you know, Piyama is an indigenous character. actress who plays her is Filipina. We might not have made a choice like that now. Like we might have preferred an actual like Inuit portraying an Inuit character, but you know, that actress is great, and you know, that's the choice they made then, and it was at least an attempt at representation that was not totally offensive and leaning on stereotypes. And there was no Inuit representation then, like, not very much anyway. So, I mean, the show took these strides and it took some risks, you know, and, you know, there's one scene where Lois is like defending this landscaper guy who happens to be Latino, and she really reinforces this notion that the labor he's doing is skilled labor and that he is a professional and he is doing like real work, you know, and that's still to this day, that is still a conversation that I see online all the time of like there's no such thing as unskilled labor. You know, Lois works a cash register and she works at a, you know, this crappy convenience store. That is real work and that is real labor, and that requires skills as well. So it's like the fact that they were saying that, you know, years before I would ever see, you know, little uh, like slide presentation thingies on Instagram saying basically the same message. You know, I mean, I think that was ahead of its time. So, I mean, yes, they have this kind of cynical view of humanity as a whole being kind of this chaotic, you know, catastrophic, precarious situation. But at the same time, they also really pushed this message that people need to be treated right and that it doesn't matter who they are, you know, and it doesn't matter what they look like. Um, so, I mean, that's a message that I don't think I really took away at the time that I saw it. I just kind of was like, oh, there's people on screen and, you know, but I didn't really realize kind of what they were doing. So that's something I appreciate now. Now that as a fiction writer who's having to make choices about how do I represent certain people, you know, how diverse, how, you know, I make these kind of choices as a writer, and you want to do it right. You don't want to, you know, you don't want to put anything out there that's going to be offensive or hurtful to people. And again, I don't know that Malcolm in the Middle made every choice quite right, but doing a lot better than a lot of shows even now. So something to be said for Malcolm in the Middle. What have I not gotten to? Dewey is amazing. Getting back to characters, Dewey is I didn't realize Dewey's kind of a genius, but uh, he's a little bit more calculated than Reese. He's got a sense of mischief and he knows how to mess things up, but he's also meticulous. And there's an episode where he kind of gaslights Lois. It's incredible. It's so fucking funny. And then there's they took a lot of swings with Francis. Like his character goes through so many transformations, so many twists and turns to his story. It would have been easy enough to keep him in military school, and I think another show that was a little lazier and a little bit less adventurous might have done that. They might have figured out a way to like, oh, Francis has to be in military school all the time. Let's figure out a way to keep him there for 6 years. Um, you know, they took some real swings with his character. He goes to Alaska. He hitchhikes to Alaska. He meets Piyama. They get married. He ends up working at this dude ranch, which I think is actually my personal favorite era of um, of Francis's story, is when he's working at this goofy dude ranch owned by this like hilarious German couple. Um, and he actually like learns responsibility and he learns discipline and all this stuff by working with animals. That was a really great chapter in his story, and I love how his story ends up as well. I think they really took some big swings with his character, and I think it was a really interesting choice to have a character that's kind of on the outside of the family unit like that, sort of orbiting. And I think that afforded them um, some leeway in terms of what they do with him and what they do with his character. There's so much to unpack with this show. I mean, it's the world of Malcolm in the Middle is unexpectedly big and unexpectedly multifaceted. Like, we find out Reese is basically a dog, like mentally, like emotionally, he's basically a dog. That's freaking funny. And we don't even get to that until like the sixth or the fifth or sixth season. I don't know. They really stayed true to these characters all the way through. And it is a surprisingly multifaceted and big piece of world building in and of itself. There's a bunch of characters I wanted to talk about in my write up, which is on my Substack and Patreon. I wrote a slightly more organized version of this commentary. And, I think for one thing, the grandma is hilarious. And also, um, there's a season where Dewey goes to this like special class of like oddball kids that are like emotionally disturbed or what. I don't know. I can't remember the exact language they used, but those kids are all hilarious. And it's just another example of how the system doesn't quite work right. It doesn't know exactly what to do with these kind of pretty smart kids, but are sort of also unconventional kids. There was something really interesting in that storyline, and I think those characters um, get a little bit overlooked, and that whole storyline gets overlooked. So, hey, I mean, I could go on and on about the show. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed rewatching, 20 years later. But let me know, like, have you watched it? Did you watch it 20 years ago? Did you watch it now? Have you seen the revival? I liked the revival quite a bit. I feel like that's for another episode. Um, I I don't know. It's just great when things are good. I love when things are good. And I'll probably be watching Malcolm in the Middle again. And hey, I would really like it if they even made another revival. I would not be mad. Like, I I think where they ended it was just about right. But like, if they found another story in there somehow, I would watch it. All right, so I've rambled on and on, but hey, let me know in the comments if you've watched the show, if you like it, if you hate it, if there's other things you want to talk about or other things you found interesting about it. I want to know. So, this is Chris. I'm signing off. Until next time.